underperform S&P 500 index funds even before management fees. This is on a given year. Over longer periods of time, over periods of 10 years, this ratio is over 95%. So if you took the set of funds that were around for 10 years or more, you calculated their 10-year performance before the fees, because fees are gonna take them down anyway, and compared it to the 10-year performance of some form of S&P 500 index fund, for example, Vanguard S&P 500 index fund, because that has the lowest expense ratio. 95% of those funds are not going to beat that. Is the S&P 500 necessarily the right benchmark? We'll talk about that. I mean, right now I'm acting as if abnormal return means outperforming Vanguard S&P 500 fund. Let's pretend that that's a proper way of thinking about the abnormal return. Then what's the point of paying management fees to these guys? Because they can't even do it. Are those 5% that are outperforming the S&P 500 index funds over 10 years? Do they have real talent or simply they got lucky? Think about it this way. This is one of the reasons statistics is a required prerequisite for this class or for Finance 301, but since Finance 301 is required for this one, think about some sort of random distribution of talent, okay? And suppose these guys didn't even try to outperform, they randomly pick stocks, okay? So there's going to be a distribution of returns over there. By luck alone, over 10 years, 5% of the funds can actually outperform the S&P 500. Probability of that happening can be 5%. Think of that as type 1 error, in hypothesis testing. Yes. From years ago where they really had big stocks. Yep. Stocks out ahead. Yep. Exactly. 5% of those monkeys can outperform the S&P 500. That's statistics for it. Oh, yeah. Yep. 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 In fact, you guys haven't taken my final exam yet, but in my starting last year, the exams are all multiple choice questions, but you get to have 3 attempts at each question. If you get it right on the first attempt, you get 100% of the points. Second attempt gives you 70%. Third attempt gives you 40%. Then I calculate a monkey value. The monkey value of exam like that is 42. So if you scored below 42, that means, there is something wrong with what you know. Whatever you know actually worked against you. It's similar to this. A monkey, by randomly picking stocks, can get very close to the S&P 500 over a long period of time. It's that simple. I mean, there's going to be a lot of variation around that, but we don't have one monkey, we have a lot of monkeys. By the way, monkeys can learn can learn the concept of value of money. This is a little bit NSFW, but I'm going to have to tell you this anyway. Uh, this redefines the expression, the oldest profession. You guys know what oldest profession is, right? Prostitution. That's the oldest profession. There were these economists, behavioral economists. Next week, we're going to talk about behavioral finance. So it's kind of a nice little link. They're working with capuchin monkeys. Uh, any Friends fans around here? The show Friends? Okay, you're too young for that. Anyway, in that show, Ross has a monkey. Uh, that's a capuchin monkey. These are much smarter monkeys. They're much smaller. So they're doing an experiment. The experiment is simple. They're introducing money into this economy, and the money is there's a shiny metal object. There's a hole in the middle of it, and whenever they're going to teach them, they bring one monkey out of the overall cage, and if the monkey does the right thing, they give him the money, and with the money, monkey can actually buy food. All right, they do all of that, and over time, these guys learn that that thing is worth something. One day, they're doing the experiment, and these are monkeys. Obviously, they don't behave. One of the monkeys hits the money tray. The money is all over the place. They already know the sound. All the monkeys come in. Okay, one of the male monkeys grabs one of the piece of money, takes it to a female monkey, and gets what he wants from the female monkey. Okay, so monkeys are not that dumb, but even monkeys, by randomly picking stuff, can actually approximate or get close to the performance of index funds. That is not that difficult. So if you're paying a stock manager extra fees because all they did was get close to it, what's the point? Just go buy the index fund. That's why we have this huge industry on index funds. I mean, let me show you the size of the Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF, which is basically a publicly traded or exchange traded version of the index fund. Let me see. The ticker for that is WOO. Let me see. Do we have it here? Yeah, there it is. Net asset value, $546 billion. This is one index fund. There are other S&P 500 ETFs. For example, this is known by a lot of people because it starts with SP, SPY. So, that's also another almost 600 billion. Just these two funds alone have $1 trillion under management. The entire market cap of uh, S&P 500 is probably about 20 trillion. We can look it up, but just those alone, $1 trillion. There are many big economies where market cap is not $1 trillion. So index investment has become very popular, partly because of the history of underperformance of managed mutual funds. There is some relatively limited evidence that hedge funds can actually do better. The only issue with hedge funds, which is going to link me to definition of abnormal returns, outperform their benchmarks. Unlike most mutual funds, hedge funds actually designate a benchmark. Do you guys know how hedge funds work? Any idea? Now, hedge funds are funds that have specialized strategies. A hedge fund is available only to institutional and wealthy investors. A hedge fund cannot sell any shares to a grandma that has $50,000 lying around. Okay? But, a millionaire that has $20 million, they could put money into hedge funds. The reason is they do very complicated and risky strategies. I'll give you an example. This You should actually read about this. There was a hedge fund called Long-Term Capital Management. This was managed by a guy named John Meriwether. He was one of the giants of the corporate bond market. In fact, mid 80s, he was leading the corporate bond and overall bond team of Salomon Brothers. That's where all the junk bond trading and that sort of stuff started. And this fund was making a simple strategy. There is a yield difference between newly issued 30-year Treasury bonds and the so-called old bonds. For 30-year bonds, Treasury does issue twice a year. They don't auction, and market determines what the yield is going to be. But as soon as it's issued, 6 months after that, as soon as the new bond is issued, the one that you bought 6 months ago becomes an old bond. But practically speaking, what is the difference between a 30-year bond and a 29-and-a-half-year-old bond? Nothing. I mean, yes, the new bond has more longer maturity, but it's only 6 months. And typically, we think about why there's a yield difference between a 2-year bond versus 10-year bond. There is more uncertainty about inflation in the future. I mean, over the next 2 years, we can guesstimate what the inflation is going to be. Unless something like COVID and stuff happens, those predictions are actually pretty good. And professional forecasters do a pretty good job of forecasting inflation over the next 2 years or so. Or you can also figure it out from the difference between the yields of the nominal bonds versus what you want to call TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Bonds. But who's going to tell me that they can accurately predict the inflation differentials for the first 29.5 years plus the 6 months later? Anybody that tells me that they can predict that inflation differential with any sort of accuracy, either A, they're ordained by God or Buddha or, whoever your deity is, or they're completely full of crap. Okay? It's just not possible. I mean, there is so much uncertainty between